Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to the Reliability Matters podcast, where we focus on the people, processes, and technologies that ensure the reliability of mission-critical electronic products. I'm your host, Mike Conrad. This is episode number 173. As the electric vehicle market accelerates, the reliability of the charging infrastructure becomes increasingly vital. Chargers that are down or malfunctioning can hinder adoption and erode consumer confidence. But who ensures these chargers are staying up and running? Today, we're diving into that very subject with a trailblazer in the EV service space. My guest today is Kameale Terry, co-founder and CEO of ChargerHelp, a company revolutionizing how we think about EV charger maintenance and reliability. Under her leadership, ChargerHelp has pioneered reliability as a service, developed a highly trained and diverse technician workforce, and shaped industry policies aimed at improving charger uptime. Kameale's journey is as inspiring as it is innovative, leading a national movement for a more reliable and equitable EV charging network. With backgrounds in workforce development, clean tech, and digital operations, she's uniquely positioned to tackle the challenges facing this growth industry. In this episode, we'll explore the common causes of EV charger failures, the role data plays in predictive maintenance, the impact of new regulations like the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure or NEVI standards, and how ChargerHelp is creating pathways into the clean energy economy for workers from all walks of life. If you've ever wondered how reliability translates to the EV world, or how technology and workforce innovation go hand in hand, you won't want to miss this conversation. Let's get started.
Welcome to Reliability Matters, a podcast for the electronic assembly industry. Each episode covers topics related to reliability, best practices, and environmentally responsible assembly techniques, with insights from experts across the electronic assembly industry. Now, here's your host, Mike Conrad.
Kameale Terry, welcome to the program. I'm so glad you're here.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, one thing business owners have in common is we all love to talk about our businesses. And one thing I've noticed over the years is my social circle has about a minute and a half attention span when it comes to me talking about my business, right? They're like, yeah. It's like going to the VFW and hearing veterans talk about their foxhole stories, right? It's like, okay, we've heard them all before, don't care. So one of the great things about hosting a show like this, and I also host another podcast specifically on entrepreneurship, is I get to learn, the background and what motivates you and things like that. Because running a business, this is no new news for you, but running a business is not easy. It's like a video game with challenges, and every year it gets harder and harder, and new monsters, new trapdoors, new rules, and you're constantly on a treadmill, trying to get ahead. And I see a lot of this.
Yeah.
I'm preaching to the choir here. Yeah. Yes. So what inspired you to start ChargerHelp? If I'm correct, I think you had a background in EV Connect. And if so, how did that influence your approach to EV charger reliability?
Sure. And it's so interesting. My inspiration to start the company, I feel like, was definitely a lot prior to my time at EV Connect. It's really how I was raised. My dad was an entrepreneur. I grew up in a community of a lot of small business owners. And I always knew that there was something that's very powerful about starting a business and facilitating job growth and really being able to kind of like map your own journey. And so when the opportunity came, one being at an early stage company at EV Connect, being the 10th employee there, they were focused on software and the charging stations, and then really kind of be forced into a situation where I had to leave due to my mother's health, who was, battling stage 4 cancer at the time. I felt like I was already kind of pre-prepared to be on this journey of being a small business owner and a tech founder. So one, I think, is seeing that this to be a business owner is a pretty incredible experience and a pretty incredible opportunity. And then on two, the second part is like being at EV Connect and seeing that there was a gap, a hole in the industry that could be solved. And I really felt like I was the best person to solve it. And so I think those things combined together, really allowed for me to take that leap of faith to step out on my own and start ChargerHelp.
Yeah, I mean, your timing couldn't be any better, right? And were you, when you were thinking about starting it, were you aware, as you are now, of the state of the EV charging infrastructure? The high percentage of broken chargers and things like that, or did you discover that as you were, starting the business?
Charger downtime and charger reliability was something that I was always aware of. Like when I started in the EV charging space, I started as EV driver support. And so most of my experience about the charging infrastructure was through the eyes of that end user, right? The person that, was trying an electric vehicle for the first time, didn't really understand how it worked, showing up to a location and maybe not having the best experience. And that level of frustration was something that is how I was introduced to the industry, right? Think at that time period, it was hard to understand whether there were true issues or not. Was this just a new user experience, that they were doing something improperly? So it was hard to prove it out, but I always knew that this problem would hinder mass EV adoption. And
Yeah.
the last thing I'll say to that too is like it was important to me because I came from a community where pollution was horrible, right? And when we stepped into COVID and people didn't drive their gas combustion vehicles, you could actually see the mountains and the air was cleaner. And so there was kind of like this larger mission connection for me that was like not only did I know this was a problem, it was a problem worth solving.
You talk about pollution. I'm a California native. I live in Southern California and moved down here from Northern California 45 years ago. And as I remember, we moved down, my wife and I moved down. We had a little apartment at the time. And we moved down in the summertime. And it was a nice area. It was okay. And one day in the fall, I got up, walked outside, and someone put mountains near our house. I didn't even know they were there before, and this was early '80s. So,
Oh,
pollution definitely then was worse than it is today, or at least
absolutely.
you saw it then. Now, I don't know if it's any better, but it's not as visible today. But I was shocked. It was I had no idea, and it's a mountain range called Mount Baldy, which is 12,000 feet. The pollution hit a 12,000 foot tall mountain from me. So I can appreciate your comments on pollution, and I can also appreciate how that would make someone lean toward a cleaner tech, right? And there's people on both sides that argue EVs are clean tech, and then some will say, well, not really,
Yeah.
because we still have to make the electricity. But I think I fall on the side of it's cleaner than the alternative. It's probably
Yeah.
not as clean as the environmentalists say it is, but it
Right.
probably is cleaner than the alternative. And, good may be the enemy of great, but, we'll take good and then we'll
Right.
work on great, right? So how can you explain, or can you explain how ChargerHelp's reliability as a service model works and how it differentiates from traditional maintenance contracts in your space?
Absolutely. So, look, I mean, one, just double tap on what you said. I'm of the mindset of like, let's continue to innovate and get better. And like, our electric vehicle silver bullet? No.
Yeah.
But like, let's just do things better, right? And so,
Dracula is still safe. He's not going
right,
to be killed by the silver bullet, but maybe it's
right,
garlic. Maybe it'll just like
maybe
repel him a little bit, right?
just a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of that I saw there was a lot of capital being deployed into this asset class, and we were putting it out on highways and byways. It was the first time that we bought software into the built environment in such a decentralized way, and we were decentralizing a fueling source, and so naturally, so there will be problems, right? But the thing that was most interesting to me was that a lot of the problems we were seeing were actually software interoperability problems. So it wasn't this ideal of, oh, I send someone out and something simply gets solved. That wasn't the situation that we were seeing. It was like, oh no, this someone threw a firmware update. Now we kind of think that's impacting the uptime. Oh, now this vehicle can't really charge here. It was like this very complex problem. And so for us, we said, at the end of the day, no one's really solely responsible for that because there's a lot of companies interacting with one another. And so when you do a traditional O&M, meaning that you send someone on site to troubleshoot something, if it's software that is failing, that isn't from the person that sent that person on site, can they do anything about it, right? And then if you have to keep going on site to troubleshoot every single time, that gets really expensive. And that end customer will just say, I'm going to rip this thing out, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
we should create a product where the solution and our bottom line, overlaps, right? There is a win-win scenario. And so if I continue to send a technician out, I'm going to bleed out capital. So I'm probably more likely to try to solve the problem because I have a fixed cost than to, maybe continue to send a technician out piecemeal by piecemeal by piecemeal. So the stark difference, right? Reliability as a service. It is essentially a fixed cost, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year contracts, and it includes unlimited labor, which my investors thought that I was crazy. But what I believed is that we had enough data and insights and technological power to be able to get to a place of risk management that I could confidently put a price structure out there that not only was competitive in pricing, but could also drive margin for the company as well.
Well, what I like about that model is, as crazy as it does sound, right, to an investor, I'll agree with that. But if you kind of dig deeper, everyone likes to say, your success is our success. It's just like a stupid sales jingle, really. But in your case, it truly is, because success for them is not having a lot of downtime, and success for you is them not having a lot of downtime. If you charged for every service visit, do you really have a vested interest in fixing it right the first time, right?
Right.
Do you really want to spend an extra hour on the job to just troubleshoot a few other things since you're already there? Now that is totally in your best interest, which
Yes.
totally benefits your customer as well, right? Because you don't want
Absolutely.
to go back there any more than they want you to have to go back there. So it's win-win.
No, absolutely. And, the part too, it's like it pushes innovation of my team and it also pushes us to be collaborative, right? So we're always looking at the data to say, is there a hardware manufacturer that deploys a certain firmware that always fails? And I just actually was just chatting with my team. We're getting these report outs of the aggregation of this data. So I can now go to that CEO and say, hey, out of all of these assets, this is how you're performing. And then also, this is how we think you can get better. And so it is this ideal of like rising tides lifts all boats. And it
Sure.
continues to allow for the entire industry, to really level up in order to be truly competitive in this space. And ultimately, give an experience that folks deserve. People spend a lot of money on this infrastructure. It should work, and we can do it. But we need the data and insights from the field in order to actually accomplish that.
Yeah. I think one of the, again, I'm going to preach to the choir here. I think one of the challenges with EV systems is the fact that there are so many players. There's so much technology from different specialties. For example, I think most of these, I'm guessing most of the charger stations are connected via cellular connection. Maybe there's some hardwire or whatever, but say if it is cellular, so you've got, a contract with T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon or who knows who, and everyone knows cellular systems can fail. The boards that run the cellular system can fail. That's my industry. The connection to Edison or what your power PG&E or whatever the power company is can fail. The actual hardware, the plugs, they can crack or break and things like that. You have stupid customer tricks where either through an accident or vandalism, people drive into them. You've got
Right.
weather phenomenon where, I've seen pictures of Tesla charging stations literally in 3 feet of water, right? Which scares the hell out of me if you think about the amount of current running through those things and voltage. So there's so many moving parts from so many otherwise disconnected industries, and any one of them can take a system down. What of all those different components, and I'm sure there's more I'm not even thinking of, what are the most common causes for EV chargers, and how does your team proactively address them? You got into that a little bit in your last answer about reaching out to the CEO and coming up with suggestions about how they do firmware updates. But is software the major weak link, or are there other things that are a close second or third?
Yeah, look, and that was like the bit that you didn't include just how it's all of those things also have software that's connected to it, and those are the things that fail most often, and they're usually the things that will mean time to repair can sit at 60 days plus, because you have to get the different software engineers to agree that one of their softwares that they pushed wasn't right, and so I think that
and no one wants to go, it was me, it was my fault.
Well, sometimes they don't even, honestly, because it's such a new and nascent technology, sometimes, honestly, they don't really know. Like, it's a little bit of your fault, it's a little bit of your fault, and it's also a little bit of your fault, But I think the close second to that is going to be some of those physical component failures. But I had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to actually do a European tour. So I was out in Europe, about 4 different countries for 2 weeks. And in the European market, which is a more mature market, a lot of these things that we see fail in the US from a hardware component failure does not happen in Europe, right? But there's also less players. And so I do think that there is going to be this moment of really some companies probably going under, not doing well, just because they don't have good components, right? Like, and that's like the bare minimum of this stuff. Is like you're deploying these things, in areas that have tornadoes, in areas that have a lot of rain, in areas that have high heat, all of this stuff. You have, as an engineer, you have to think about that and be able to deploy a set of infrastructure that can combat that. And I know we can, right? Like, we build bridges and things, like we can figure this stuff out. So I think that stuff will go away. I think that the part that will continue to be hard is the software part, and how we solve that outside of just talking to the CEOs is that really for us, our measurement of success is mean time to repair. So if you see something that goes down and it takes 60 days, can I actually study the failures of those software pushes in such a way to bring that mean time to repair from 60 days to 1 day? Can I bring it down to a few hours? Can I prevent it? Because here's the thing with software is that software and components, all these things will always fail. That is not a thing that we will move away from. What we have to get to is how fast can you fix it, and then can you prevent it, right? But there is always a likelihood that something will go wrong. And so we are able to reduce mean time to repair through the large aggregation of data. So being able to see something fail over and over and over across multiple customers, across across the United States, we can start building back the patterns and being like, okay, when this failed, we sent out a truck, or you tried to troubleshoot, that didn't work last time. Let's actually just update this configuration. Or when this failed, we actually now think that it was the car OEM and not the payment system. And you can get that level of granularity, really through data.
Yeah. In our industry, I'm in the electronics manufacturing industry. So we build equipment for the electronics manufacturing industry. And in our world, we talk about big data all the time. When I got into this industry in the 80s, memory was super expensive. I remember going to a memory manufacturer, walking into the building, getting a tour of their thing. And they were in California. And then on the way out, I had to go through a metal detector. Not on the way in, on the way out, because these modules, these cards with memory chips on it were so expensive. If I grabbed 10 of them, I could sell them on the street for $1,000, right? It was crazy. And now memory's cheap, absolutely dirt cheap. So as a result, we're collecting a lot of data because we can, which has created another problem. There's this big, vast, terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data. So ominous that how do we even come close to discerning that data and all of that? So that just brought another problem. But AI is helping a lot with that. I don't know if you're utilizing that in your world yet, but certainly AI is really good at with the right learning module. When it's trained properly, it can actually it can look at vast amounts of data that no human could ever see in a lifetime, and discern it and categorize it and then, present to you, the the cold, cruel facts, and then you can decide what to do from there. And my industry, by the way, is contributing to your success, in that there's an issue with circuit assemblies, with printed circuit boards, that if they're not cleaned after soldering, which many are not for commercial applications, for military and medical and aerospace, and they're all cleaned. But the materials, the boards used in your application are considered class 2 or class 3, class 1 being the highest level of reliability, class 2 being like servers and office machines, class 3 being Game Boys and electronic flea collars and things like that. Your industry is using boards that are between class 3 and class 2. So there's not a lot of need on paper to clean them. However, 100% of the stuff used in your world is used outside, subjected to harsh environments. And the contamination left on the boards that would otherwise be relatively harmless if it was in an Amazon server farm or an office is reacting to the humidity, to the moisture in the air, and shorting out the boards. It's creating what's called electrochemical migration, and it's growing metal crystals on the board and shorting out the boards. And I would like to think that 100% of the reason why EV charging systems fail is for that, because we'd be selling machines to every manufacturer of boards for that application. But I think that is one of them, which is really hard to diagnose. And I think that brings me to the bigger point, where the best practices for reliability, because there's so many players involved and so many components that make a charger system work, and so many chefs in the kitchen, I don't think they're building these things necessarily for the environment that they're deployed into. Weather events, customer interactions, having to connect to all these disparate vendor suppliers that they may not normally, have to know the right protocols and communication protocols and all that stuff. I think there's just a little too many chefs in the kitchen, and they're learning. Obviously, they're learning. So ChargerHelp is known for training technicians from diverse backgrounds, including former oil and gas workers. That's an interesting one. How do you identify and train these individuals for success in the EV industry?
Absolutely. And just, I guess, to tap on two things you said earlier, just quickly, I agree with you. I think that it's too many hardware manufacturers right now out in the U.S. specifically, but I do think now with some of the reduction in some of the federal funding, you really then have to lean into business models. You have to lean into consumer choice, consumer experience. And so I am excited to kind of see how things will shake out in that set. And I'm really excited to see, to continue to see the winners. Like there's companies like Alpatronics and Chempower that are coming from the European market that have done this really well in Europe. And I think that they're going to give a lot of the U.S. companies a run for their money. So I do want to point that out.
There's hope.
Yeah, there is hope. I would, lead with hope, Mike.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go for that.
Yeah, but in regards to, training, one of the things that we knew to be true is because with charging infrastructure, it's not simply about components. It is kind of like this software, piece to it. And so much so that a lot of times for some companies, they were flying out software engineers to go troubleshoot issues. So you have somebody that's making six figures, $250,000, getting on a plane to go and sit in front of a station to troubleshoot an issue, right? Yeah. And then those aren't the type of people that really want to be in cars and driving around or whatever anyway. So we wanted to find a group of folks that you could train on software. But the other piece of this is that these are high powered machinery. So there's a level of safety that you have to be, a culture of safety, right? And so if you chat with a lot of these folks that worked on oil rigs and worked in oil and gas, the level of the culture of safety there is something that you don't, it is just so prevalent to just who a lot of these individuals are, right? And a lot of them wanted to continue to have high paying jobs, but they knew that oil and gas, like for them, some of it was a health hazard as well, but they just had just a level of technical um experience from the oil and gas place, and also just the culture of safety, that to retrain them to understand software issues was actually a very natural progression. And so that has been like really, it's been incredible to see that happen. And then you don't have to bring in other folks to replace people's jobs. You can really have folks innovate with this new fueling source.
Excellent. How does your workforce development program contribute to both the reliability of EV infrastructure and the economic opportunities in what would otherwise be underserved communities?
Sure. And I guess I'll point out, like for us, we were really big on, we don't necessarily target any specific community. What we wanted to do was be able to create opportunities for everyone to compete. Like I've always been at the mindset of like, how do you just get the best people to do the things, right? And have it represented the communities that you're in. So if we have service stations in Iowa, right? So that set of technicians might look different than my technicians in Brooklyn, but it's the ideal of finding local talent and allowing them to properly compete in this space. Like that's what we've been really leaning into. And how we've done that is really through collaboration. We work with the Society of Automotive Engineers to actually come up with the first ever EVSE technician certification. We have worked with IBEW to figure out how do you create pathways for folks that want to become electricians, right? And so for us, it was always this ideal of ensuring that you can get the best talent, and then you can look to partners that have already been in these spaces and add to, right? Not replace, but add to what has already existed. And quite honestly, I feel like that has led to so much of our success. We believe that, we can be a profitable, great company without shutting people out, but with really trying to figure out how do you get there together. And it's hard. And so I won't say that like, oh, this is easy and everything's rainbows. Like, no, it's difficult and it's hard. And I don't have gray hairs yet, but I'm sure that I'll gain some. It's the next 5 years of doing ChargerHelp. It is not an easy thing to do, but we definitely wholeheartedly.
You may not have gray hair yet, but there's certainly no unicorns or rainbows floating around your office, right? I mean, it's I think that's
my office. It's very like we get work done here.
yeah. I hear you. You talk about SAE and your work with them for the certifications. You've been involved in, you don't just show up to work and send technicians out. I mean, you've been involved with SAE. You've been involved in shaping policies like California's EV Charging Reliability Act. What impact do you hope these policies will have on the industry?
I think at the end of the day, I hope that it all contributes to a seamless experience. Like at the end of the day, I think that if a fleet operator is switching to an EV fleet because they believe in, the reduction of total cost of ownership, that they actually have a great experience, right? And so I really champion this idea that you have to build, business and industry at the same time with new industries. And at the end of the day, you got to make sure that the consumer's first and you're thinking about the consumer, everything you're doing, and that you're delivering on what you said you were going to do. So that's what I really hope, is at the end of the day that people buy the stuff that they get. It's the right stuff and it works.
Well, we know it can work because there's, and you're well aware of the studies that show, Harvard Business School recently published a study that showed 70% of public charging stations are inoperable at any given time. That's just a national average. And they looked at 20,000 charging stations. That was a big study.
Yes.
But that excludes Tesla. Tesla, which are not public charging stations, at least not at this time. Well, I think they're starting to be, but they're not considered public charging stations. Their uptime, it's a little hard to gauge it because, Tesla's not publishing all that stuff. But my understanding is the Tesla stations are generally way more reliable than Charge America's or whoever. I don't know who all the players are in that world. But so that tells me that it's possible to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to build it right, design it right the first time, and maintain it properly.
Yes.
And the public stations really have a lot of work to catch up to if you benchmark Tesla chargers, not cars, but chargers. They do pretty well on that. I know the new NEVI program, if you want federal money, you have to guarantee a 97% uptime, right? Right now it's a 70% uptime. So we got some work to do. And I know that there are games being played with the definition of uptime, right? For example, my understanding is that if you have 20 chargers and 5 of them are broken, but there's always another available one, that's considered uptime, meaning that no one was turned away because machines were broken. You could have, out of 20 charging stations, 19 of them broken. But as long as only one person shows up every 5 hours, that's 100% uptime because that no one was turned away. So it's kind of funny math. I think how they're all the manufacturers are parsing, wordsmithing what uptime really means. But I think arguably it will be a higher, even with all the games, it'll be a higher level of uptime. So with that new program of 97%, how is ChargerHelp assisting clients in meeting these new federal standards? Did that just create more pressure? Did that up your game? You know what the requirements are? Do you have metrics that will not only analyze what issues there are, but compare them to the uptime percentages that are required?
Yeah, so we were actually a part of the group that helped come up with that standard, and it was a collaborative effort with the industry because, to your point, it's like what it really comes down to is then who's responsible for paying to fix it. So here's an example. We've seen instances where a car OEM has pushed out a new firmware, and that specific car model, and so not even like all their cars, but a specific model cannot work. We start seeing failures on certain specific hardware models. Is the station down? And if it is down because the car this specific car, then who's responsible for paying the engineers to figure it out? So I will say, I understand, it could see very funny, but when we were doing a lot of these conversations, it really came down to well, then who's responsible? So then you'd start creating all these loopholes because you're going into the mindset of creating a metric based off of, well, I don't necessarily think that I'm responsible and I should pay for fixing this. Right. And so it's hard, right? It's very hard. And so anyways, how do we help? A lot of what we've been working on is transparency. So even being able to show that nuance, right? And so whether you are, creating the bills or the ones that's collecting the data on the bills or maybe your hardware or whatever, at least you understand the nuances, and then you guys can make a decision on what you consider up or down. But then even at least getting to the point of making a decision on then who is responsible for fixing that and paying for it. And so that's the role that we play, is really trying to bring a level of transparency to the industry. For our customers, we will be responsible. So if that station isn't working, then it is on us to go to the car OEM and to go to the hardware manufacturer and figure it out, right? And so that's all we're just trying to bring light to. At the end of the day, there hasn't really been business models that are directly tied to downtime of who is responsible for paying, who is responsible for fixing it. That is the part that is usually gray.
That's where you have 12 companies in a circle all pointing toward each other, right? It's a game of dodgeball, financial dodgeball there, and a lot of times it's probably not quite black and white. It's probably shades of gray, because there may be a primary, but there's certainly a secondary.
Absolutely,
and because it's hard to describe, but systems ought to be robust enough to kind of have a plan B, particularly if it's software related, where if it senses something's not right, it goes to a, maybe a low level configuration or, a standby configuration or whatever the case may be. I think if I read correctly, your company, ChargerHelp, recently raised a little over $17 million in Series A funding. Congratulations. How do you plan to leverage this investment or that investment for future growth, assuming you haven't spent it all already?
No, yeah, so that Series A was almost 2 years ago
Oh,
now,
okay.
which is crazy. Yeah, and so a lot of that investment went into really expanding on a reliability as a service, like, offering. So being able to go to customers and getting really close to a guarantee on uptime, which I'm really excited about, and then also putting a lot of work into the Empower platform. And so, like, in order to deliver, on a product where you say unlimited warranty, you have to have a very robust back
Yeah.
end and platform to facilitate that, understand that, crunch those numbers. I don't say that we do AI today. We have like some agents that we've been training, but really we've just been doing a lot of computer science, a lot of like algorithms, a lot of like predictions. To do true AI, you have to have a really large data set. We
Yeah.
have last year, we marked about 19 million unique data points. And it's a lot, but it's not a lot for an agent to actually become truly smart. And that's a little bit of a difference between, I think, ChargerHelp and a lot of other companies, because there's so many companies out there today. Oh, we have this AI agent. And you're just like, well, how much data is it actually learning off of?
Yeah.
And is it unique data to you? And then it goes like crickets. So
Yeah. Well, that's
that's
the
that.
equivalent of taking one class in college and thinking you have a degree in that, right? It's
That part.
not enough information.
Yeah. So
Oh,
that's what a lot of the capital went into, was like out the platform, getting more assets under management. Today, we have about 2,500 assets under management that we take care of across the
wow.
U.S. Um, yeah.
Well, that's impressive. What
Well, thank
trends do you foresee in the EV charging industry, and how is ChargerHelp preparing to adapt to these changes? I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
this is like, you're always thinking ahead, right? And one thing's for sure is, change will never stop.
right. Yeah, I would say there's probably going to be three major trends in the industry. One, I definitely think we're going to continue to see companies die in the industry, and I think that's fine. And how does Charger Help kind of like we adapt to that? Is that I think when we first started, we were just like, oh, we want to help everybody. We'll do reliability as a service on all the stations. And now I'm really at a place like with my team, it's like, no, like I don't want to work on that station because I know that they will never do some of the baseline things to actually have a successful infrastructure. And I don't want to participate. But what I will do is talk about the folks I think that are doing really well, right? Like I was chatting about earlier, like Kempower's back end. If you guys don't know about Kempower, look them up. I feel like I went and drank the Kool-Aid at their space, but it's just like such smart engineering, such smart back end, like chef's kit. So when there will be companies that die, I think Charger will continue to adapt by choosing companies that do well in regards to like they have the customers, experience at the forefront of how they build, and they're not trying to cut corners and cut costs just to deliver a product, right? I think the second piece that we'll continue to see is like I continue to see that there is growth in electric vehicle fleet electrification. Are people throwing millions of dollars behind infrastructure itself? Not like how we saw it before, but they're more so saying like, no, I want to electrify my fleet, and then therefore I will need infrastructure. And I'm okay with that. I actually think that's the right way to grow because they're electrifying their fleet, not because of a nice to have or even because they care about the environment. They really do see that it's a reduction in total cost of ownership. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay if your reason to electrify is because of numbers. That's fine. Um, and then I
Yeah.
think the last, the
Well,
last
I
piece,
always say people chase two greens. One is
yeah,
the environment and the other is
yeah,
cash,
but it's
right?
gas, and that's fine.
But even if you don't chase one green, you're still benefiting from the other, right? So who
Exactly.
cares, right?
Yeah. And then, I mean, the last piece that I'm really excited to see, happen is like our cooler electric vehicles. Like, I think, I've been super excited to see what's come to market so far. I actually have my Slate jacket on right now. There was a new EV that was launched last night by a co-founder, a founder that I know named Chris. Out of Jeff Bezos' camp, which is very interesting. Super
Mhm.
cool EP coming at $20,000. I'm just like, that stuff. So I think you're going to continue to see trends like that where people are like not just focusing on EVs, but it's like, let's just build great vehicles. And that's really what Slate EV came about. It's like, no, we're just going to build a great vehicle and it happens to be electric. Also okay with that. So those
Yeah.
are the three trends that I see coming about.
Yeah, excellent. And finally, Camille, looking back on your journey with ChargerHelp, I'm going to say it again because I heard some feedback in my ear. Looking back on your journey with ChargerHelp, what accomplishments are you most proud of, and what lessons have you learned along the way? And that's really a question I normally ask on my entrepreneur podcast, but I think
Yeah.
it's so suitable to ask it on this one.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the great thing I'm proud of is just like to take an idea to reality is like the most transcend. I don't know. It's like you like transcend to a certain extent. Like something was in your brain, like, and then you're like, no, I should do the thing. And then you get other people to believe that they can also do the thing. And then you get people to give you millions of dollars to also believe that you can do the thing. Like, yeah, it's crazy. So I think like that's the part that I'm most proud of. Is like I had a hunch, I had an idea, I could be of service to an industry. I have a real solution. I can actually tackle a problem. And and other people also believe that. Like, I just feel like it feels like magic, huh? It feels like magic. And so that's the part that I'm probably just the most proud of is like to build something. Um, and then what was the second part to that?
And what lessons have you learned along the way?
I would say the biggest lesson that I've learned is that at the end of the day, everything still comes back to human relationship and human connection. It's like whether it's, charging manufacturers, I'm just like, you're doing a bad job. Like, it's still about us going to dinner and me being like, here's data that you're doing a bad job.
Right.
Like, how can we do better? It's like this ideal of sometimes, and I think COVID did this a bit where because we were buying screens all the time, it was
Yeah.
hard to take away it was easy to remove humanity from people and not realizing like, no, like this is a person that is a brother, sister, or mother, or, puts their pants on one leg at a time or drinks
Yeah.
water, like it's a human being. And so
Right.
that's the other thing that I think has been the greatest lesson is like, no matter how you're building or what you're building, we still build for people. And there's something special about that. And it's something special about breaking bread with people, getting to know people, and just like figuring out how to, grow together.
That's awesome. Is your dad still with us?
Yes, my dad is still around. My mom passed maybe 3 years. Time flies, man. Maybe 3 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, sorry to hear that. So I would imagine your dad, as an entrepreneur, is exceptionally proud. Is he an armchair quarterback? Meaning, is he giving you all this advice that may or may not be needed at the time, or is he just sitting back, just in awe of the journey you're on?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, he was I talked to my dad like literally every day. But in the beginning, it was hard for him to understand because like, I raised a large round and I had only made a little bit of money. And so like in his, like, cause he grew a business, like my dad started his company when he was 22 and he's never taken venture capital. Like he's just grown a small business. Like you have revenue, you pay stuff. Like, so this idea that like, he's like, what? Like, that was hard for him to get his mind around.
Sure.
But now, I talk to him a lot about like just business basics, making sure I understand my numbers, unit economics, like those are our conversations. And his whole thing is like, he likes to tell people that I'm a him 2.0. And I'm just like, okay, Dad, like I had a mom too. So
Right. Don't take all the credit, right?
right. He's like, yeah, that's like myself a 2.0. And I'm just like, okay, thanks, Dad. But yeah, he's the one that even being like venture back and like all of this is like he continues to like humble me that at the end of the day you're still building a business and like yeah you can get influx of capital but like still make sure you're going to turn a profit, right? Like
Right.
because there's so many tech companies that they just get capital and have never turned a profit, and so like are you a real business, and so he's the one that continues to like bring me back to earth and be like, okay, but
well, he's
talk
right
about your
though.
bottom line.
He's totally right. I mean, business these days certainly requires some kind of infusion of capital, right? Whether it's your own savings or, venture capitalist or an angel investor or whatever. But there is still a business fundamental that can't be ignored. I mean, at some point, maybe the plan is first 5 years you lose money. I mean, I think Amazon lost money for a long time, for years and years and years. And many companies, that's their strategy. But at some point, they become enormously successful. So if that's part of the strategy, fine. But at some point, it can't be about where the next bit of money's coming from. And it has to be about using money more as starter fluid, high octane starter fluid to get the car going. But at some point, the fuel pump takes over and the car starts running on its own, not reliant on spraying starter fluid down the carburetor, right? It's which is a horrible example considering we're talking about EVs.
I know. As you were doing it, I was like, that's crazy that we're...
I know, right?
I don't know what the electrical, but I hear you. I'm tracking.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, I have an old 1968 Mustang, and every once in a while, if I don't run it for a while, I have to, open the hood, take the air cleaner off, spray this super high octane, basically jet fuel, aerosol jet fuel down the carburetor so that when the motor turns over, it's got something to ignite.
Yes.
But the point is, cash can be that starter fluid. It's vital, but you can't run on it forever. At some point, it has to generate its own cash. And it sounds like you're doing very well. Well, for my audience who would like to get more information on ChargerHelp and Camille, if you are watching this on YouTube, look down here where it says see more, and Camille's company information will be there, and you can learn a lot more about Camille on that site as well. And for my listening audience that are in the car or the treadmill or Lord knows where you are right now, I don't want to know. When you're done with all that, look at the at your podcast app's show notes, and you'll see that information there as well. Kameale Terry, keep doing what you're doing. Someday I will buy an EV. I'm excited about it. I'm just not ready yet. But when I do, I will thank you for making my journey with that more seamless.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's another episode. Thanks for listening to or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Reliability Matters on your favorite podcast app. If you're watching this podcast on the Reliability Matters YouTube channel, be sure to like and subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released. We release new episodes on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. And a very special thanks to the Printed Circuit Engineering Association's PCB Chat at pcbchat.com and Ascendo Reliability at reliability.fm for syndicating the show. Thanks also for your questions and episode suggestions. Please keep them coming. I love to hear from you. Send comments or episode suggestions to mike@mikeconrad.com, and that's Conrad spelled with a K. To learn more about the Reliability Matters podcast, please visit our website at reliabilitymatterspodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening or watching. Until next time, keep learning, keep doing it right, and remember, reliability matters. I'll see you again soon.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.